Come on in, pull up a chair, and take a load off, because today I'll be sharing my favorite board games of 2020, and I'll dive in right after this. Howdy, 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 gang. Welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. As I mentioned in the open, I am going to be sharing my favorite board games of 2020 in just a moment. But first, I do want to point out, if you like this video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already, and if you do subscribe, ding that bell, because it will not only let you know when I upload videos such as this, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Monday through Thursday nights right here on YouTube as I bring you the latest in tabletop gaming news. And of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all latest in gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. I am actually shooting this video on New Year's Eve 2020. So the first thing I do want to share with everyone out there is to wish you a very happy new year. Let's hope, fingers crossed, that 2021 is a better year than 2020 in many ways. Although speaking of 2020, the Gaming Gang has had a pretty good year. Once again, the website has brought in over 1 million unique visitors, and surprisingly enough, the YouTube channel has seen more than 250,000 views on the videos. Not too shabby. I'm pretty proud of that, especially seeing that we have such a tiny team and we've got a budget all of 0. So thank you, all of you out there, for that as well. So I'm going to dive in. I'm going to share a dozen of my favorite board games from 2020, but there are a few things that I do want to mention. First off, I say these are my favorite games. I'm not claiming these are the best games of 2020 because, first of all, I have not played every game that was released in the past year by any stretch of the imagination. And I got to say, there were some games that got higher review scores than the ones I'm sharing over at thegaminggang.com. But I have played these more and more and more. So I have actually found that these are my favorite games. Plus, these are games that the gang really enjoys playing as well. So it's important for me to point that out. Not the best games, and it is not necessarily the highest review score games from thegaminggang.com. Third thing I should mention, obviously your mileage is going to vary. So you will see some games on my favorites list that other people are going to name as some of the best of 2020. Others are going to be, you'll sit there and go, what? Maybe. Also, some of these games did not come out in 2020, but I had an opportunity to play them and review them over the past year, and they are my favorites of 2020. So without further ado, let's take a peek at my first game, and that is Mariposas from AEG. It's designed by Elizabeth Hargrave. I enjoy this game, and the gang enjoys it as well. In fact, it's a little dirty because it's been in the car. This is one of the games that has to stay in my car. I like Mariposas. It's easy to explain to people, easy to jump into. It's a very pretty game. It is a striking game on the table as well. The component quality is really nice. I love the little butterflies for the various different waves of butterflies that are flying across, migrating across North America. And the gameplay itself is very pleasant. You can make it competitive if you want to. There really isn't any way, I should say, for you to throw a wrench into the plans of other players. But whenever we play it, we tend to try to kind of help each other as far as the migration of the butterflies. And where might be the best location for those butterflies to land during your turns. All in all, very, very nicely done. This is one of my favorite AEG games from this past year. AEG does not release a ton of board games every year. In fact, it seems to me, and maybe it's just my imagination, but it seems to me that we've got smaller and smaller numbers of big game releases from AEG, but the ones that we do get tend to be really, really well done. So that is Mariposas. Also, want to point out, there is no rhyme or reason to the order that I am sharing these games. These are all mixed up. It is not based on, the highest scores to the lowest scores, and it's not based like alphabetically or anything like that. So, first off, Mariposas. Next, I've got Villagers, which is from Sinister Fish Games. I always point out that I have a very soft spot for engine building games. I really, really like engine building games. And once again, this is a game that's very easy to explain to players, but there's a lot of subtle strategies to this and a lot of depth in this as well. I like how we have prerequisites for your village to be able to recruit specific types of villagers, job descriptions that they have to entice them to come to your village. I like that. There is an excellent solitaire mode in this as well. So if you are unable to get a few players around the table, you can actually take on the evil countess in a solitaire game that plays really well. Really, really enjoy it. Villagers from Sinister Fish Games. I have to say, I don't believe this actually came out in 2020, but I did have an opportunity to play and review it in 2020. That's why it's on this list. And this is another game that sits in my car because it could be called into action at any time. That is Villagers from Sinister Fish Games. Moving right along, this was actually a reprint. This is a revised edition from Osprey Games. It is the second edition of The King is Dead. And it is designed by Pierre Sylvester. This is a very cool, light strategy game. Yet another game that takes 10 minutes to explain to people how to play. I love the fact that you've got a hand of cards, and it's not the first time we've seen a limited action sort of game. You've got a hand of cards that have various different actions. There are 3 factions that are vying for control of Great Britain, and you get to play one of these cards to perform an action, but you don't get to perform that action ever again, and there is no limit to how many of these cards you can play during your round. Thing is, if you play all your cards, then everybody else is going to be performing their actions and you're going to sit there with nothing to do. I love how it's a bit asymmetrical and you really have to kind of balance using your actions when you need them or holding back and just trying to play one or possibly 2 actions each round. This is extremely accessible, and there is a good amount of strategy that goes into playing The King is Dead well and actually coming out the winner. That is The King is Dead from Osprey Games. Next, we've got Thieves' Den from Daily Magic Games. This was a game that I actually had an opportunity to do a Kickstarter preview when it was up for crowdfunding for Daily Magic Games. And I really, really enjoy this. This is a set collecting worker placement game. And it's got a very, very cool art style to it. I know as far as Daily Magic Games, they have this kind of fantasy world setting that a lot of their games are set in, and that's where Thieves' Den takes place as well. I love this is also a bit asymmetrical. So you might have more going on your turn than other players have going on during their turns. There is a good amount of take that in the game outside of just kind of taking worker placement areas away from your opponents. There's a lot cooking in this game, but it's also another game that's super easy for players to wrap their heads around. And I have really, really enjoyed playing Thieves' Den. This is another game that comes out quite a bit for the gang, and you can't go wrong. Can't go wrong with Thieves' Den. Once again, I am not positive if this came out in 2020 or not. I think it did, but this was one of our earlier reviews of 2020. This was one of, I think this was maybe in February, I did a review of this. And that is Thieves' Den from Daily Magic Games. Next up is a big box game. It is from Czech Games Edition. This just recently came out. It is Lost Ruins of Arnak. In fact, I just recently posted my review of this in the last week, a little more than a week, I think. I love this game. This game is a blast. First of all, it is chock full of goodies. Essentially, what's going on is you are exploring. You're explorers. You've got a couple of archaeologists that you send out to different sites, and you are trying to discover the lost ruins of Arnak, but you're also exploring all these other ruins as well. Component quality is excellent. The artwork is very, very cool. There's different artifacts, different items that you can use. There's actually 2 game boards. This is dual-sided. So you flip it over, it's a completely different kind of ruin site that you're, exploring. And it's got a few game tweaks to it as well. So depending on what board you're playing with, you're going to adjust the way you actually tackle the game. There's also an excellent solitaire system in play as well. Czech Games Edition usually comes out with 1 or 2 kind of big box epic games every year. Lost Ruins of Arnak was their late 2020 release, and it is great. I love this game. And interestingly enough, it's kind of a mashup between worker placement and deck building. And as I kind of mentioned in my review, none of the mechanics that we're looking at in this game are new or revolutionary or anything like that. But the way they're meshing together makes for an excellent game. Loads and loads of fun, and some really good decision making has to go into a winning game of Lost Ruins of Arnak. Interestingly enough as well, there are actually 2 games on my favorites list that incorporate deck building and worker placement. And you'll see the other in just a little bit. All right, moving right along. Let's get some love here for GMT, my good friends over at GMT Games, Ancient Civilizations of the Inner Sea. This is a big, epic civilization game, and the cool thing is that you can play up to 6 players with this. To me, it's got a bit of a diplomacy kind of vibe to it because there's a lot of abstraction in this. You don't have a bunch of counters or tokens for your armies and your settlements and things like that. It is very easy to explain to new gamers, but there's a lot to chew on in this game as well. You're taking the role of an ancient civilization, obviously enough. And one of the aspects of this that I really love is that you can actually go about playing Ancient Civilizations of the Inner Sea as a pacifist civilization, and you can still win. Very rarely do we see board games where it's like, oh, well, you know, you don't have to approach the game as a conflict simulation and able to win. You can easily win without resorting to conflict. And it turns out that's usually not the case. Not so with Ancient Civilizations of the Inner Sea. Really, really enjoyed this. I got to be honest, I have not had an opportunity to play with 6 people with Ancient Civilizations of the Inner Sea, but I have played it with 4. In fact, I've played it a few times with 4 and once with 3. Really, really enjoyed. And the game doesn't really outstay its welcome either. It doesn't tend to drag on and on and on, which I really love. And you play across a variety of eras, so it is very, very cool. Really like this a lot. That is Ancient Civilizations of the Inner Sea from GMT Games. Next up, I've got Calico, which is another AEG release. This is a little bit smaller than Mariposas. This is kind of a puzzle game, and I will mention, let me move this out of the way here. I got all these games kind of stacked up around me, that I introduced this game to my mom, and my mom is not a gamer. My mom is also approaching 80 years old, and she loved this. In fact, the entire gang really, really loves this. This is another game that now sits in my car all the time. It is a tile laying game, and you're matching patterns essentially. And it's funny because when you first start playing this and somebody first learns how to play Calico, they think, oh yeah, this is easy. Oh yeah, I got this figured out. Well, you're looking to put together certain patterns to score certain points. There are different cats that you're looking to attract over to your quilt, because that's actually what you're supposed to be building, is you're sewing a quilt, and the cats are worth various points, and putting different colors in a row is worth points, and having different patterns in a row is worth points. It is not as easy to score a bunch of points as you may think. And one of the aspects of Calico that I have to laugh is every time I have shown somebody how to play this, when we start the first game, they're like, oh yeah, this is easy. And then when they start running out of spots available to put their tiles, then they realize, wow, this is a lot more thinky of a game than I thought it was. So really, really enjoy Calico. This is another game that's got a nice art style. Component quality is really well done. Also, as you can see, the box top isn't on straight. But that's Calico from AEG, another one of my favorites for 2020. Moving right along, Napoleon Returns, which is from Worthington Publishing. This is a very light war game. This is a perfect gateway war game of the Waterloo campaign. And component quality, once again, very, very cool. It's not overly complex. I love the kind of Kriegspiel look to the pieces, because you don't have hundreds of counters that are out there on the game table. You just have a handful of these rectangular blocks. In fact, memory serves me correctly, I think there's like 20. And essentially, you're trying to outmaneuver your opponent and put them in a position that is going to give you strategic superiority to wipe them out. Very, very cool. Very easy to jump into. We really, really do enjoy Napoleon Returns 1850. I will point out it is kind of a very high strategic level game. Not a lot of tactics involved, a lot of abstraction as well. But there's enough meat on the bones of this design that if you're looking to introduce a non-war gamer to conflict simulations with something that's not going to overwhelm them, that has some visual appeal to it, it's got some pop to it, this is definitely a game to keep your eye on and pick up. I want to give an honorable mention as well to Crusader Kingdoms from Worthington Publishing. Also, another really good game. I just have not had a chance to play it a ton. I played it enough to be able to do a review of it, but it hasn't gotten its way back to the table as much as Napoleon Returns 1815 has as well. All right, next up, I've got Gates of Delirium, which is from Renegade Game Studios. Once again, I'm not sure if this came out in 2020 or not, but with Gates of Delirium, this is an abstract game. It's got kind of a Lovecraftian vibe to it. So each of the players are going to actually represent investigators researching the mythos, as well as cultists who are trying to bring about the end of the world by opening these gates to unleash these Lovecraftian horrors. And it is really interesting how that works, because sometimes you're in your sane phase where you're sending out your investigators to do certain things and gather information. Other times you're in an insane phase, which allows you to try to open these gates. And the cool thing too is that you can't only focus on one phase or the other. You have to really kind of hedge your bets with this as well. Gameplay is nice and quick. It's got some visual appeal to it as well. It is essentially language independent. You really don't have to do a lot of reading on the cards or anything like that in order to understand how to play Gates of Delirium. It is kind of creepy. The artwork is pretty wild as well. Definitely dig Gates of Delirium. Another one of my favorites for 2020, and Gates of Delirium is from Renegade Game Studios. Next up, from Amigo, I've got Carnival of Monsters. I don't believe this is a 2020 release. I think this came out before that. But this is designed by Richard Garfield. This is a fun, light, kind of like monster collecting game. Essentially, your new members, or actually you're vying to become members of the Royal Monsterological Society. And in order to be brought in to the society, you have to show off your menagerie of monsters and creatures that you've gone out and you've caught. And that's essentially what each of the players are going to be doing. They're going to be visiting all these various different locations and attempting to capture these various different monsters, who of course are all worth a variety of victory points. Lots of fun, very easy to jump into. Once again, this is another game that does not take a long time for players to wrap their heads around, but it does take a bit to actually play well. This is not a game that you can just throw on autopilot and think you're going to succeed. Really like this a lot. Artwork is fantastic, and the component quality is very nice as well. And that is Carnival of Monsters. As you can tell, this is yet another game. I guess I should call it a trunk game, because it is another game that stays in my car, because this gets played quite a bit. This really does get played quite a bit. All right. Got two left. So next up, I have Dune Imperium, which is from Direwolf Digital and Legendary Pictures. And this is a tie-in to the upcoming Dune. And this is the other game that is kind of the mashup with worker placement and deck building. And I have to say, we have had a blast with Dune Imperium. My only knock on this, and I know some people have taken umbrage to it, to my thoughts about it, I just don't think it has a lot of visual pop. The artwork's fine. Game board's kind of bland. There's actually an expansion that's available, and it's a cosmetic expansion, essentially, with miniatures and different tokens and things that really provide a lot of flash to this game. So obviously other people who were involved in the release of this game also kind of feel that the core game is a little bland looking, a little bit. That said, it is awesome. This is a lot of fun. It thematically feels like Dune. It feels like you're competing with the other players, with the other factions for all these various ways to collect victory points, be it from controlling areas of Arrakis itself to having pull with the Bene Gesserits and the Fremen and the Emperor. Very, very cool. A lot going on in this. This is for up to 4 players. This also has solitaire as well. I have played the solitaire, and it works. It is good. It's a lot of fun. That's Dune Imperium. This is actually one of the newer games on my list. In fact, some places I don't think have received their shipments of Dune Imperium just yet. But this is definitely a game you want to keep your eyes on and pick up if you get the opportunity. All right, and my final review. Well, I shouldn't say review. Take me a second here as I'm moving things around. All right, my final favorite of 2020 is Imperial Struggle, which is from GMT Games. If you are a fan of Twilight Struggle or 1860 or actually a variety of the card-driven games from GMT, then you will definitely want to take a peek at Imperial Struggle. It covers about 100 years of the conflict and competition between the British and the French all throughout the world. And you're kind of focusing on kind of 4 areas of the globe as well. I do mention this is a little more complex, in my opinion, than Twilight Struggle. I know some people have said that they thought the complexity was about the same. I disagree. I think this is a little more complex than Twilight Struggle, but it is not necessarily difficult to understand, especially once you've got a game or 2 under your belt. It all starts to click. First time out the gate, you might have some hiccups along the way, but it does not take long for you to wrap your head around Imperial Struggle. Love the fact we got a bunch of history going on throughout this. This is a very unique design. This is not simply Twilight Struggle. Oh, let's jump back to like the 17th century. Not at all. This is a fresh, new design. It just happens to be from the same designers as Twilight Struggle, and it is a card-driven game. We have had an opportunity to get this to the table a few times, and I like it more and more each time I play because I get to understand it a little more and more every time I play. That is Imperial Struggle from GMT Games. And that is my final of my dozen favorite games of 2020. At no point am I trying to imply that these are the only games that were my favorites of the past year. These are just at the top of my list. And I got to be honest, out of any of these 12, you can do no wrong in picking up any of them. All right, that is it for this video. In fact, if you have an opportunity, my other video, if you are a fan of role-playing games, is my favorite role-playing game releases of 2020. It is also going up on YouTube today as well. So if you like role-playing games, be sure to check that video out also. And of course, if you like this video, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, ding that bell, because it will not only let you know when I upload videos such as this, it'll also let you know when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Monday through Thursday nights right here on YouTube. And of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all the latest in gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Happy New Year, everyone. I look forward to bringing you more tabletop gaming coverage in 2021. I hope you join me as well. Just like I hope this never-ending pandemic finally comes to an end. So as I wrap up all my videos during the aforementioned never-ending pandemic, here's hoping all of you out there have a wonderful New Year's. And of course, I hope you're being smart and staying safe. Oh, you're still here. Well, if that's the case, if you'd like to subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel, by all means, click right here. And if you'd like to check out one of our recent live streams, click right up top. And if you want to roll the dice and see what the algorithm for YouTube recommends, click right here. And of course, thank you once again for watching. And gang, please stay safe and wear a mask.